Hello to all. I will start and then Rebbie will take over a bit later. Integrated Soil Fertility Management, or ISFM in short, really needs to be seen in the context for smallholder African systems to be intensified. This is not only true in densely populated areas where land is in short supply, but equally so in forested environments where slash and burn agriculture is still practiced. One of the main drivers for deforestation is extension of smallholder farming. There's been a lot of research for development in soil fertility management in Africa, and there's a number of general conclusions that we can derive from all that work. One, nutrients removed from a system need to be replenished, and although we have legumes that fix nitrogen and we have locally available sources of organic matter, we will need fertilizer. Secondly, for economic and environmental reasons, fertilizer and other nutrients, they are best used as efficiently as possible. Now that last statement can be translated in a number of general soil management practices. Generally, the supply of nutrients needs to be matched with the demand, so we need improved germplasm. In the context of CSA, for instance, that's drought tolerant. Secondly, fertilizer and organic inputs like crop residues and manure, they are best applied in combination, because both of those inputs, they address different constraints to crop productivity. And thirdly, in specific situations, other amendments besides fertilizer and organic matter may be needed, where there are constraints that are not addressed by those, like application of lime in soils with acidity-related constraints. These are lessons learned since a long time. Recently, through better understanding of smallholder farming systems, there's a number of other observations that matter for soil fertility management. One is that if you go into a community, farmers have different access to resources. Some are better off than others. And this is a photo from Western Kenya. On the right, you see a better off farming family. On the left, a resource poor family. And you see that the maize on the right farm is much more homogeneous compared to the left farm. Now, if we zoom in on the left farm, we see also that there are good plots uphill, usually near the house, and very poor plots, usually downhill away from the house towards the valleys. Now, these two plots, they are operating under the same variety with the same management and the same weather. So we have those important soil fertility gradients. This sort of picture is very common to a lot of densely populated areas in most of sub-Saharan Africa. So we need to add a third general conclusion that says that within farm soil fertility grades and farmer resource endowments, they affect access to agro inputs for farming families, and they affect their use efficiency. Again, we can translate this into two management principles. Generally, farmer resource endowments and production objectives, they affect decision making. And secondly, targeting inputs to those soil fertility gradients will affect the use efficiency and yields. So recently, all these different observations were summarized in a definition of integrated soil fertility management, saying that it's really a set of soil fertility management practices that include the use of fertilizer or organic inputs and improved germplasm, in combination with the knowledge on how to adapt these to local practices, which include the resource endowment, the decision making, and the fertility gradients, all aiming at maximizing agronomic use efficiency and improving crop productivity. And of course, all inputs need to be managed following sound agronomic principles. In the associated brief, we have depicted ISFM using this step diagram. I will not go into details, but it shows in summary how co-application of different components actually continuously increases the use efficiency and crop yields of systems where ISFM is being applied. Fortunately, we have some long-term trials on ISFM, and we have seen through analysis of those trials that ISFM can actually be climate smart. First of all, we see that from this data, 20-year data from a trial in Ibadan in Nigeria, we see that the average maize grain yield is really highest when you combine fertilizer and organic matter. That's the orange bar to the right. The left bar is the no input control, and the middle bars show either the application of organic resources alone or fertilizer alone. We are also seeing that the variation, the sort of coefficient of variation of yields across the seasons for 20 years is really highest for the blue bar on the left for the control treatment and really low for the right bar, the orange one, which is the combination of fertilizer and organic matter. Again, the other treatments operate in between. And thirdly, we've seen that soil carbon levels are actually maintained under the applied treatments, under the combined treatments, compared to the carbon levels before cultivation. For all the other treatments, we see that the carbon values go down. ISFM is not just a set of theoretical principles. There are real systems like maize soybean systems in Nigeria, where we see that locally farmers use local varieties of maize input of fertilizer. Through ISFM, people have adapted to the use of hybrids that have a higher use efficiency. They target fertilizer to maize and soybean in rotational systems, thus taking the advantage of soybean residues. They integrate dual-purpose soybean varieties which fix more nitrogen and leave more organic resources in the soil and eventually apply manure. And in some instances, people combine these practices with the water harvesting techniques to address moisture stress like SI systems and so on.
As my colleague has said, I think we see a lot of benefits when it comes to use of integrated soil fertility management practices. However, the scaling up of ISFM has been constrained mainly because of the various aspects across the value chain. What we have known is, ISFM is knowledge intensive. Because you need to have knowledge of how to integrate the inorganic and organic and then bringing in the best agronomic practices. So that requires the need to have a workable knowledge delivery system to reach to the farmers. Again, the use of improved seed and inorganic fertilizers requires that smallholder farmers should have access to credits as well as the physical access, where they can access the farm inputs, for example, agro dealer shops. And of course, that needs that we need to have farmers that are working in groups, because there is always, confidence when farmers are working in groups, in the sense that, they can be able to access credit in groups and increase the chances of repayment. But also, when you get to the output markets, which is necessary when farmers are getting to a point where they are, inputting farm inputs and they are able to lend, they need to have profitable markets to make this system workable. And you find that, for the knowledge, the output market, input market, the financing system, for all this to work, you need an enabling policy environment. And then overall, you find that, again, for the investments that you're making in the ISFM technology, these are long-term investments. You are talking about building of organic matter over a long period of time. That requires that farmers should have secure land tenure systems. And if all that is in place, then this is where we see productivity increasing as at the same time preserving the environment. Just to emphasize on the aspect of knowledge, that this is really an area that I think a lot of consideration is required, because, you are talking about technologies that is knowledge intensive, and usually you are talking about to farmer learning, mass demonstrations, to farmer field, mass days. That combined together, that's for adoption. So when you talk about ISFM technology, really you cannot just use one facet of delivering knowledge. It has to be a holistic approach, and that's where we see a lot of adoption of the messages when it comes to the use of ISFM technology. And just to give you an example of our organization, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, we have been working in several countries across Africa, 13 actually. And we have seen that, increasingly over the years, we started promoting the technologies in 2009. And as of today, we actually have 1.8 farmers who are actually using the technology. And what we have seen is that, the system, the adoption is mainly around where we have a more integrated cropping system. And this is where we bring in the cereals and legumes, the root and tuber.
There's a number
is really, basically becoming the entry point or really driving the process of this ISFM technology. And what we have noted is, I think there is, the farmers, they get attracted to really, start practicing the ISFM technology when they are in these integrated systems of, let's say, cereals and legumes because of the high economical benefits, but also at the same time bringing in legumes to the system. Legumes in most African countries, you find that it's a women crop, so women tend to get attracted. But also we know by bringing the legumes into the system, it's also a good way of improving the nutrition at the household level. So the graph I'm showing here is basically where you see a maize monocropping plus fertilizer versus where you have an intercropping of cereal and legumes with and without fertilizer. When you have an intercrop, of course, you improve your productivity, but by adding fertilizer, you are almost tripling your returns to the investment. So, for example, here, in an intercrop without fertilizer, you're talking about $234 per hectare compared to $647. So I think this is, one way that you find that these systems are increasingly attracting farmers who are actually practicing the ISFM technologies. Now, in conclusion, we actually see that ISFM builds on a large body of knowledge in relation to tropical and soil fertility management and integrates specific features of smallholder farming communities and landscape. It is a climate smart since it generates
Okay, this is Sheila. I'm so glad they got through their presentation. It looks like they have dropped out. So I'm just going to read the rest of these conclusions. Number 2 is ISFM is climate smart since it generates increased productivity and income, resilience, and soil carbon stocks. Number 3, ISFM is knowledge intensive and requires specific awareness creation and capacity development strategies. And lastly, ISFM is reaching scale within a diverse set of farming systems with important benefits to many smallholder farmers, noting the need for enabling conditions for agricultural intensification. Let's switch here to the Q&A portion. And have they returned? I see.
We are back.
Oh, yay! Wonderful, wonderful. Our first question is from Nice Mice. Can agriculture increase its crop productivity without use of inorganic fertilizers?
Let me try to answer that, Sheila. The short answer is no. No, of course, you could look at all the other regions in the world, and nowhere has agriculture been improved without the use of fertilizer. You could also argue we've gone much smarter in the meantime, and we'll find alternative solutions for Africa, but unfortunately there are none. We can certainly improve the use efficiency and the way fertilizer is used, and we can work on rates and so on. But there are a number of essential nutrients that cannot be replenished through any other means than through the application of external sources, either via fertilizer or via cutting down forests or destroying natural environments. Of course, this is a very hot question sometimes, but having worked in this region for the last 25 years, I've not seen anywhere a sustainable practice that can be scaled up that's not including inorganic fertilizer.
I'm going to put you...
Could you hear that, Sheila?
Yep. Okay, I put you on mute just so I can read the question. The next one is from Austin. How can ISFM take advantage of enhanced access to inorganic fertilizers in the situation where fertilizer subsidy programs exist?
Yeah. Yes, indeed, ISFM can take advantage of enhanced access to inorganic in situations where fertilizer subsidy programs exist. I'll just give an example of a country like Malawi, which had started subsidizing fertilizers, but I think 2-3 years down the line, they included the subsidy of seed, which included maize plus legumes. Under those aspects, you can already see, as we explained, that we see the adoption in these cropping systems, the staple crops, where you have the integration of cereal and legume. This is where you see a lot of adoption. So under, such kind of environment, I think what we need is to basically bring the other aspects of ISFM. So, for example, the agronomy that we talk about, you need to intensify on the knowledge, making sure that when they access the fertilizer, they are able to integrate with other organic systems. But also you can bring other aspects of the value chain, as I mentioned, out to the market. Basically, you are in a position where now farmers can be able to benefit more from the subsidy. And as a result, you need markets that are viable. And I see that even as an exit strategy to a subsidy where farmers can actually be even, to sustain the productivity without necessarily relying on the subsidies in the long term.
Well, we have time for one more question, and I know there's so many more questions today, and I'm going to ask people to repost any unanswered questions in the next part, which is our panel discussion. So last question from Felicia. Have you done any trials of ISFM under no-till conditions?
Let me try to reply to that. ISFM and no-till or conservation agriculture, they are not competing with each other. They are just based on a set of good agricultural practices and used in combination. Now, the problem with no-till or conservation agriculture is that you need to cover your soil with a certain amount of biomass. Now, if you don't have good yields, you don't have enough crop residues to keep your soil covered. So in a sense, ISFM could be a precursor to no-till agriculture or conservation agriculture, where you first ensure by the right use of nutrients and all sorts of other practices that you increase your crop yields, you generate the crop residues needed to keep your soil covered, and you can actually engage in no-till or conservation agriculture. We have seen CA and no-till failing under low fertility conditions because there is not enough organic matter or biomass available in those systems to keep your soil covered. Over.
Ben, Bernard, and Rebbie, thank you so much. And I know we had a number of technology challenges, and I'm so happy we were able to hear you both today.